and a hamburger. Eat them all. Blow stuff up. That's what they want. Anyway, I want to welcome everybody here watching us by live stream. I want to welcome all of you here. So grateful. Want you to share the stream. God help me. I'm going to do my best to do a good job this morning. So what I want to talk to you about, is there anybody here that believes America, and hopefully I'm going to convince you of this, is a good country? Is there anybody here that believes that? Try it. Is there anybody out there that believes America? Yes, it's a good country. Amen. I'm going to try to do my best this morning, particularly in the founding of this country, to show you the major influence that Christianity had in the founding of this country. All right? So I'm going to walk through. It's going to be a little history lesson. Just buckle up, enjoy the ride. There will be some visual aids. We will have some visual aids, so it'll be good. So this country was founded, basically there was colonial, it was founded as British colonies initially. A bunch of different countries of Europe came, but the major turning point was in 1620. Christian pilgrims arrived in the New World, and they signed what's called the Mayflower Compact, which meant that the colonists were going to be self-governed. They were going to be a colony that was self-governed. So from the beginning, America had the ideal, the people coming here had the ideal that this was something that where they were not going to be under the rulership of another nation, but they were going to have their own form of government. And in this Mayflower Compact, they stated why they were establishing this colony. So this is long before the British ever formalized their rule. This is long before revolution or anything. The pilgrims that came here said, the purpose of this colony exists for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. So from the very beginning, this country was based upon that. England formalized rulership over the American colonies in 1660. They had influence over the Americas for a period of time, and then they formalized it. They created a foreign office that directly would manage the American colonies, and that began in 1660. These are just big points. And so the English began to put their system of government in place. Something happened in 1740. Anybody ever heard of the Great Awakening? Right? There were several of them. In 1740, there was something called the Great Awakening. And what happened was revival broke out in the American colonies and lasted for almost 20 years. There was preaching, teaching, lots of open-air evangelism. It was a really radical time. And they were teaching Jesus, and they were teaching the rulership and the kingship of Jesus. They were teaching the liberty of all rights of all people under God. And they were teaching private property, the right to own private property. Because under British rule, you didn't own private property. The British could come and they could take your property at any time because you were a servant of the king. So they want your house, they would come in. They could kick your door in. You'd be sleeping there with your kids and they just, boom, come right in, search and seizure. It's why it's in the Constitution. One of the reasons it's in the Constitution is because under British law, you had no such right. They could show up at your house. They could take everything you had. They could throw you to the street on a moment's notice. This is what was going on then. And so these pastors, you're going to see the role of the church, and the role of the pastor was like, crazy. It's like church shouldn't be involved in politics. If you read the early history of this country, up until probably 1970, church was nonstop involved in this. And there's a reason for it. Because the rights of Christ is what this country was established on. They were preaching and teaching the rulership of Jesus, the liberty of all people, and the rights to personal ownership. During this time, so 1740, there's this revival going on in America. England has just ended a war with France. How many knows wars cost money? Right? And so what better way to raise money and get your money back than to tax the colonies? You don't have to tax your own people. You have to tax where we're at home. Hey, we're going to tax all those guys over there. And so they began this oppressive tax system into the colonies. And anybody here ever heard of taxation without representation? And so the colonists are like, hey, if y'all are going to tax us, then we need to have representatives in your government in order to speak on our behalf. And they said, nah, we're not going to do that. And so what else they did is they not only put this oppressive system of taxation in place, they put standing armies in all of seduced by these guys in the black robes. It's a preacher's rebellion. So put the first slide up there. I'm going to take you through some of these people. What you're going to see, you're going to see a portrait of America that is not being spoken of in the modern day. So I'm going to walk, just hang on. So throw the first picture up there, Alex. You got it? Yeah, okay, so this guy, his name, what is this guy's name? His name's James Caldwell, Reverend James Caldwell. He's a pastor from New Jersey. He is a descendant of a Scottish nobleman. And so his family in Scotland had fought the British for hundreds of years. And ultimately the British took over Scotland. They seized all of his family's assets and kicked his family to the New World. And so this brother used to preach in the pulpit with 2 pistols in his belt. Right? You want to know where they stood on gun rights? The brother's up in the pulpit with 2 guns in his belt. Because he knew who the British were and he knew what they were. He had grown up and seen this oppression. And he had watched how they had treated his family. And the British knew who this guy was. They knew his family. They knew his family's name. And they knew this guy. And so what he became the chaplain and the quartermaster of the New Jersey militia. The British universally hated him. They pursued him. They went into his house with his wife and small children present and shot his wife in the head in the presence of her children. Because he's off with the militia, so they're like, oh, we know this guy. They kill her. She was sitting on the bed with her small child. The officer walks in, boom, puts a bullet right in her head. Nice, right? So what he does is he returns home for the funeral. He buries his wife. He goes back to where he's from, Elizabethtown, at great risk. And while he's there, he buries his wife. And then he goes to the church that he pastors and he gathers all the hymnals. And he tells the militia to take the hymnals and to tear the pages out and use them as wadding for their muskets. So they're literally firing worship at these dudes, right? That's what he told them. He was assassinated. He was approached by a colonist, and this colonist was paid by the British, and the British had him killed. He was assassinated. But he was a pastor. You understand that? These weren't pastors that were hiding in their freaking basements, right? Telling everybody to be safe. Be safe. Everybody be safe, right? These are not modern culture pastors. These are the pastors that bring freedom into a country. These are the pastors that will stand against tyranny and an oppression of government. Well, we just all need to subject ourselves to the rulers in hand. These guys didn't, because it was contradictory to the laws of Christ, and it was contradictory to the personal rights that they held dear. They didn't care who was going to tell them. They paid dearly for it. Absolutely, they paid dearly for it. But you stand here today because of them, right? There's a tremendous legacy because of these men. They weren't cowards. The Reverend James Malberg, throw the next one up there, is a Lutheran pastor. He raised the colonial militia out of his own church of 300 men. When the British were really starting to do all these lockdowns, he basically went into the pulpit, preached a message on Ecclesiastes. He said there's a time for peace and a time for war, and the time for war has come. And he took off his black robe and he had a colonial officer's uniform under it, and he marched outside, and 300 of his men joined him. And he formed the 8th Virginia Militia. And he fought with George Washington, and George Washington field promoted him to Major General. Pastor, not in his basement, not tucking his pants in his socks, twinkling his toes, telling everybody to be safe, leading the way, Christian, being a voice when everyone else is voiceless. First thing the British did was shut down the churches. I don't know if you know that or not. Do you know what Article 1 of the Constitution reads? The religious assembly shall not be prohibited. Why did they put that in Article 1? They didn't put that in Article 5. That's the first article of the Constitution. Religious assembly shall not be impeded upon. Because that's the very first thing the British did, was shut down the churches. They shut them down. They were not allowed these pastors to hold influence over the people because they wanted to control the narrative. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Throw the next one up there. This guy's one of my favorites. I love this dude. Pastor Jonas Clark. Look at that wild hair. He's like, let's go. Pastor Jonas Clark. So the British are marching on Concord. Those of you who know, the British, they had powder and they had guns and all this stuff stored in Concord. The colonists went and took it all, right? So the British wouldn't get it, but the British are marching towards Concord because they're trying to seize these powder magazines and where all these weapon cache was, but the colonists had already done there. So Paul Revere rides to Concord and they gather in Pastor Jonas's church. They gathered in his church. And the militia gathered, and Paul Revere said, we need to know if you're going to fight. And the militia said, we have been born for this hour. The militia leader said, we will fight, and we will die if necessary, and we shall do all of this under the shadow of this house of God. Next day, Pastor Jonas leads 77 men against 700 British. The British are coming. Jonas takes his 77 men and stands on the bridge. And they say to him, in the name of King George, we command you to lay down your arms. And he said, we know no king but Jesus. And he said, we will not fire unless we are fired upon. And if you have come to bring war, then let it begin here. Who was out front? Wasn't your mayor? Wasn't your political leader? Most certainly wasn't your president or any of your congressmen. It was the pastors who were out front saying, look, we're not bringing the fight to you, but if you're bringing the fight to us, then it's on. Now here I'm going to show you something that isn't taught in your history books. Certainly isn't the American narrative of the day. Anybody ever heard of Wentworth Cheswell? Throw his picture up there. Wentworth Cheswell was a deacon, and he was a disciple of a man named Reverend Jeremy Belknap. He was a free black man who owned 20 acres in New Hampshire. You see, the narrative that's being pushed upon America today is called critical race theory. And the essence of critical race theory says that America was founded in slavery and exists for the propagation of slavery. The history doesn't teach that at all. It's not true. Here's a free black man who owns 20 acres. He is free and a property owner in the New England colonies. He served as the town sheriff. The brother was the town sheriff, right? In a white world, right? How's that go over? If whitey is controlling everything and white man's controlling everything, this guy was a town sheriff. 1776, he joined the militia. And he joined the Light Horse Brigade and became a member of colonial intelligence. He was a member of Paul Revere's Midnight Rider. Why don't they tell you that there was a black man that rode with Paul Revere? Why don't they tell you that? Did you ever know that? That there was a black man that rode the same circuit with Paul Revere? They don't tell you that. Why is that? Because they want to keep the racial divide. They want to keep the ethnic divide. They don't want the truth to come out, and they want to divide it. He rode the same routes, and he carried the same messages across enemy lines. This guy risked his life nonstop. They were running back and forth. They were riding horses in between the lines. They were warning when the British were coming. They were coming and they were running intelligence. Reverend, he was a deacon in his church, and he was a disciple of a very influential pastor who became a huge abolitionist after the war. The Reverend Lemuel Hayes. Oh, we got another pastor. Throw him up here. Reverend Lemuel Hayes. Free black man. Everybody say it with me. Free black man. Free black. Right. Joined the Continental Army, fought at Ticonderoga. After the war, he returned to his church. He became a staunch abolitionist. And he spoke fiercely against Southern Democrats who were holding on to slavery. You see, it wasn't the North that held on to slavery. It was the South that held on to slavery. And this guy, black man, returns to his pulpit and begins after the war, and it was the Democrats who kept the slaves. People don't know that. But here you have a black man who was a Republican. Where's that in the history books? Anybody teaching you that? No. Both of these men had, ready? Say this with me. Both of them had black fathers and white mothers. So it shows you how interracial marriage was perceived in the early colonies, doesn't it? Anybody ever thought of that? Black man with a black father and a white mother, both of them. Chesterfield, the Chester guy had it, and so did this guy. Both of these men. So this guy, and then we have this guy, Methodist deacon Oliver Cromwell. So this is Methodist deacon Oliver Cromwell. George Washington personally signed his discharge papers and presented him with a newly minted badge of military merit, citing Cromwell's military service, his superior personal conduct, his dedication, bravery, and sacrifice. It is evident that Cromwell was an honored member of Washington's personal guard. At the end of the war, Washington personally guaranteed him a pension in today's money of about $35,000 a year. With that money, he purchased, landowner, with that money, he purchased 100 acres of land and raised 15 children. Pastor, or deacon in this regard, welcomed into the Continental Army, worked very closely with George Washington. Washington signed his discharge papers and awards him merit and makes sure he gets money after the war for his service and sacrifice. Anybody ever heard of that before? No. Don't worry. Throw this guy up here. Everybody say it. There's a Cuban connection. Huh? You like how I worked this in here? Huh? I know where I am. I know where I am. This guy's name is Bernardo Galvez. Bernardo Galvez was the Spanish mayor of New Orleans, right? So you got to understand, America is nothing but a bunch of colonies and territories at this time. There's no states. The states came later. So this guy is the Spanish governor of Louisiana. He pledged loyalty to the American cause. The Americans asked him if he would help. And he said, I will do it alone for the glory of God and for the cause of liberty. He would sail ships from New Orleans to Havana. Because there was a Spanish fort in Havana, and he would collect arms and powder from the Spanish fort in Havana, and then he would sail it back to New Orleans and go up the Mississippi because the British had blockaded the eastern seaboard. But this guy brought it on. And he fought and kept engaging the British. At the end of the war, the northern British army was being defeated, and Washington was coming south against the northern British army, and he surrounded them. Anybody ever heard of Yorktown? Right? So he had them surrounded at Yorktown. The British are asking for aid from their southern army, so they had a southern army. So the southern army was going to move north to try to help them. This guy, Alves, attacks the fort at Pensacola in Florida, which was considered like a really powerful fort. And so Bernardo goes after the fort in Pensacola, causing the British, because he knows what's going on, and it caused the British Southern Army to turn and come south, leaving Cornwallis, the British general, exposed and allowing Washington to capture the fort. And so he did a huge victory. Washington was very honored, and he said his contribution to the American cause is immeasurable. He helped and brought and framed the Treaty of Paris. Treaty of Paris is the surrender of the British to the Americans. He framed it, helped frame it. So here's what I want to do. I want you to understand something. It's we the people, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to address something else that's in the narrative today. Say it with me. In an age of ignorance, it's time for truth. Right? Come on. This may be a short message, but freedom's going to ring, so it's all good. I could have put more in here, but I thought, anyway. So America was born in revival, came out of revival, came out of a spiritual awakening. Christianity and the churches played a major role. This is very important. When the war ends, right, 1783, the war ends, 1784, the Constitution of the United States is ratified. So our Constitution comes a year after the war ended. War ends. 5 years after the Constitution is ratified, all of the New England colonies and the Western territories abolish slavery. 5 years after the signing of the Constitution, the New England colonies and all of the Western territories are declared free. At this time, of all of the New England colonies, only New York and New Jersey held on to slavery. The rest of them said no. And the government at the time said all of the Western territories will be free. Those Western territories turned into how many states? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 states. They became Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And then the Western territories beyond that, eventually at the same time. Ohio's never held a slave. Michigan's never held a slave. Indiana's never held a slave. Illinois's never held a slave. Wisconsin's never held a slave. Neither has Minnesota. 5 years after the founding of our Constitution, this was declared free. Only the southern states refused to end slavery. Hence the conflict, right? So you have the northern states liberating, saying we're done, right? Say, why did it take 5 years? Man, news traveled slow back then. I don't know if you know, we got the internet. I mean, we can e-sign documents. They had to travel by horseback. It'd take a month to get anywhere, right? 6 miles would cost you a day. It'd take you a day to go 6 miles. Yeah? So they end it. But the South refuses. In 1799, right? So this is about roughly 15 years after the Constitution was signed, New York ends slavery. New Jersey's still holding on. A few years later, 1804, New Jersey decides to end slavery. And the entirety of the West is now declared free. And this becomes the flashpoint, right? So not only were the Western territories, now all the rest of the West, they're saying from coast to coast, there's no more slavery. And the southern states vehemently oppose this. And they rise up and they say, no, you're limiting us, right? You're forcing us into a box. You're trying to isolate us. Little people don't know this one either. 1808, Thomas Jefferson tries to abolish slavery in the nation. He tries to get rid of it. His own state of Virginia opposes him, along with North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia. All of the southern states opposed him. Well, I mean, we look at our government now, you can't get anything done unless there's a consensus. And so these states were so opposed to this that he wasn't able to pass a national law, but he was trying. What ends up happening during this time is white, say it with me, white northern preachers and black northern preachers. And the blacks, these black preachers, they would travel to the South and they would preach the gospel and they would preach abolition. They weren't hiding in their basement. They were risking their own lives going into the South where they could be killed, they could be lynched, they could be oppressed. They went in their basement telling everybody to be safe. You understand me? Do you see the world do you see the contrast of the worlds in which we find ourselves? And they went down there and they preached it. And they preached the gospel, they preached the kingdom, and they began to stir the pot of abolition. So if you ever watch a movie on this, they're going to say, northern white elites walking around with champagne in their hand, northern white intelligentsia. The white elites were the ones who abolished slavery. They had nothing to do with it. It was preachers in their pulpit that were speaking against the inequity. It was preachers in their pulpit that were speaking against the injustice and stirred the North to turn and ultimately go to war to free them, than to break this off the southern states. So you need to understand this. So when you're watching a movie and they talk about slavery and all this other stuff, and you see these guys walking around with champagne glasses in their hand, like the Washington Post, they're the ones who freed the slaves, or the New York Times, these socially elite, they're the ones who did it. It wasn't them. It was the church, Christian. It was pastors. It was people that supported righteous causes and stepped into the game. In 1861, Civil War erupts. The South refused to give up their slavery. And so at this point, the North was willing to concede it and saying, okay, you guys keep your slavery. And they had a containment policy, which was basically, we can't stop them from doing it, but we can contain it. We can stop this from spreading all over the place. And this is where, if you know anything about history, where Kansas was in dispute, and John Brown and all these abolitionists, and they had a big war or big, conflict over Kansas. And the United States said Kansas territory will be free. And the South said, no, Kansas is not going to be free. And so they began to push into the West. America has a lot of injustices that at the core are biblical principles. This is what people need to understand. On 4th of July, okay? Like on 4th of July, we need to be educated about our country, because there are revisionists in our country, and there are forces within your country. This isn't my country. This is your country. There are forces within your country that want to destroy it. And if you don't think that's true, you are woefully naive. They want to write a story of history that doesn't exist. They want to continue to build ethnic divides. They want to continue to divide classes and ethnicities and say things that are not necessarily true and they're not supported. Massachusetts, a black man could vote from day one. A black man could be a property owner. They never held slaves in Massachusetts. Have you ever heard that before? It was only the white southern states that held slavery. It was a handful of states. Did they do wrong? They did really wrong. Was it unjust? It was extremely unjust. And 700, say it with me, 700,000. Just say that again. 700,000 Americans, white Northerners, fought in this war to end slavery. 700,000 people died in this country. So when the narrative is that America is founded on slavery and exists to promote slavery, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm not saying there aren't oppressive systems within our country, ladies and gentlemen. There are. There are oppressive systems within our country. There are things within our generation that we should address. There are systematic oppressions, no question. There are prejudices, there are inequalities, there are all kinds of different things. But the church in our modern age is said, sit down and shut up. Don't say anything. And if you do, we'll shout you down. And if you do, we'll cancel you. And if you do, we're going to report you for hate speech. It has nothing to do with hate speech. It has to do with what's true. You can do with it whatever you want. What you need to see is that when this country was founded, and as this country has been built, there's been a lot of inequalities. No one's doubting the inequalities. No one's questioning the inequalities. We can find inequality anywhere. If you're looking for problems, you'll find them. Throw a rock. If you're looking for injustices, find them. Throw a rock. What the catalyst here is the churches. The catalyst here is the preachers and the congregations. This is the catalyst. I was telling this to my wife in the car in Bentonville, Arkansas, because I was explaining to her a bunch of stuff, because I've been researching this stuff all week and just trying to dig in and trying to figure out what I can use, what I can't use. And one of the things about the revolution is that the war was not decided through major battles. It was decided through local skirmishes. And like a lot of the stuff that's going on in America and all of the injustices that seem to be in the stripping of the rights and all of these divisions that are being coursed within this country with an agenda. And people are completely naive if they don't think there's an agenda. There's an agenda, ladies and gentlemen. There's no country like this country. They can control Europe. Europe is controlled. Canada is controlled. New Zealand is controlled. Australia is controlled. Do you want to go to Canada? Good God. That country's almost communist now. Australia the same way. But they can't do it here. They can't do it here because we are a united states. We have the individual rights here that don't exist in other countries. And this is what they're constantly trying to get you to give up. They're constantly trying to get you to give up individual rights, right? One of the founding fathers said, if you sacrifice freedom for the sake of safety, you are worthy of neither freedom nor safety. And what are we doing? We sacrifice our security, we sacrifice our liberty for the sake of security. And we allow a government to encroach more and more and more and more upon a land that was never designed to be ruled but by the people. This is your country. It's 4th of July. Know what you are, know what we are. Right? America's got problems, ladies and gentlemen, but she's the best ship in the water. I tell people all the time, I said, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And what are we? We're the salt of the earth, right? The church has to take its rightful position within this culture. And what has happened, particularly during COVID, oh my gosh, it's like almost like a mafia hit. They rolled us up in a carpet and took us out the back door. Nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. I don't even want to say what I said, but I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm gonna stay on topic. I said a lot, but you know, yeah. But the idea is that this is not correct, ladies and gentlemen. There's a plan in play. And so, as I was telling us to Sherry about how these local skirmishes and these local conflicts happened, like what happens in the United States is they want the sort of oppressive powers. When there's a voice that is speaking hopelessness to you, it's not of God. When they're trying to control you and tell you you can't do anything and you can't make a difference, and that's really what the projected, it's hopeless. You can't change anything. It's hopeless. Well, the war wasn't won in major battles. It was won in local skirmishes. So I'm going to cross lines here, but I'm going to stay in the kingdom. But I'm definitely going to cross a cultural line here, but I'm going to stay in the kingdom. There was in Benton, anybody heard of Bentonville, Arkansas? Right? Home of Walmart. Home of Walmart, Bentonville, Arkansas. The school board in Bentonville, Arkansas was trying to ram LGBTQ ABC curriculum into the elementary schools. Everybody say, one Christian woman. She ran for the preschool, she ran for the school board. She said, I've had it. And she won the school board. You know how many total votes she got? Total votes. Total votes. Somebody take a guess. Anybody? 35. Local elections are determined by less than 6% of the electorate. You don't think you can make a change differently? I mean, I could get 35 people. I could move to Arkansas. I could pay my friends or something. You know, I don't know, but I could get 35 people. And she went on the school board. Opposite of that, and that didn't happen because she, one woman, said, I can't make a difference here, but I can make a difference here, right? They want you to believe you can't make a difference. They want you to believe that the narrative is defined. The narrative isn't defined. It's another thing about the United States is it's extremely localized. We have a federal government that oversees the states who willingly submit. So the states of our country are a willing submission. The federal government has the power to the degree that the states are willing to submit to that federal power. The federal power has no right to encroach itself upon, we agree. That's why we're called United States, right? We're not one country ruled from Washington. We're individual states, and that's what makes this country what it is, right? It's like abortion. Let me cross some other lines here. People think abortion's over. Abortion's not over. Abortion has been returned to the states. Why? Because we're the United States. So the federal government didn't do away with abortion. The Supreme Court merely said this is a state issue and the states can decide if they want abortion or not. You don't have to worry, New York's still gonna have abortions. You don't have to worry, California's still gonna have abortions. Portland, Oregon, all these leftist states are still gonna have abortions. But they were not, the states that don't want abortions are now free. The populace can choose whether or not they want abortion in their state. Do you understand this? Because we're a United States. So they're making a big deal out of nothing. You want the right within your state, don't you? I don't want some king sitting up on a hill in Washington, D.C. dictating to all of us. That's not the way this country was founded. Then you have a state government, right? Let me show you how localized this is. You have a state government that's what rules Florida. But the state government, we have a county government. The county government is under the state, but the county government establishes its own deal. Then within the county government, you know what you have? You have a city government. You understand? And that's why you have all these individuals. There's no blanket laws in this country, very few. There are different things within a county, different things within a city. This was created on purpose because the founders didn't believe in a centralization of powers. They didn't believe in one guy sitting up on a throne telling the entire population what time it is. They believed that people in local communities should decide their own destiny. They believed that people in local cities should define their own destiny. This is how we were founded. And it's important that you understand this as a narrative. Some of you are like, duh, I had this in history class, Pastor, or U.S. government. Well, for those of you that say duh, for the rest of us and for those that don't know, understand this. You can make a difference. Fort Worth, Texas, right? Remember when gender bathrooms came about? Remember that? Gender neutral bathrooms? Anybody? Not gender bathrooms in schools. Do you know that policy came from? Ready? Fort Worth, Texas. Fort Worth, Texas. One guy, you know what he did? He ran for the school board. And when he got on the school board, one of the first things he wanted to do was make gender neutral bathrooms and promote this agenda. There's a picture of him with Obama, right? And they're getting an award. Do you know how many votes he got? How many votes? Just take a guess. It's more than 35, right? 1,200. One man in one county, in one city, receiving 1,200 votes is dictating national policy. How is that possible? How is that possible? Because we don't seem to understand how things work. And I don't think you understand the level of difference that you can actually make. Some of you find something, research it. You feel calls to government, but you don't have the guts to do it because you think you got to run some major campaign. How about 35 votes? Good God, we can get 35 votes out of this room, right? I mean, campaign. Do what you got to do. Some of you can make a difference in local levels. You can make a difference in small ways. It's we the people. So that's a challenge to some of you, is to not roll over. You can make a difference. And you know where an easy way to make a difference, I've said it 100 times, is the school board. The school board. Make a difference. Find out how, I don't know how Miami works exactly, because it's not my field, it's not my lane. I've never really given it much thing, but you can find where you can win. Find the person who won the school board seat. Find one who fits your ethnicity. Miami's extremely diversified. And that woman only got 300 votes. Good God, I can beat her, right? That dude only got 300 votes. I can beat that dude. You want somebody with 300 votes dictating policies to your children? That's what you have. That's what you have. Look at what these guys win by. They win by nothing. Anybody ever voted in a school board election? I can't remember if I have. I don't think I ever have, unless it was on the national ballot. That's the only time I ever voted. Because people don't vote in school board elections. You can make a difference. You can bring change. You can. You don't need a PhD. Oh, I need a PhD in education. Says who? Says who? You don't need a PhD in education. Who told you that? That's not the way we're structured. That's the beautiful thing about America. If you think you can do it, you're qualified. That's what's crazy about this country. If you think you can do it, you're qualified. When I was in Germany, I told you guys this story before. We were staying at this lady's house, and she had a bunch of, just kind of like, I don't know, she had a bunch of people in and out all the time. I think it might have been her daughter. She was going to become a dry cleaner. She wanted to open up a dry cleaner. She had to go to school for like 3 or 4 years to become, ready? A dry cleaner. Then she had to apprentice. This is Germany. She had to apprentice under a dry cleaner for 2 years. So before this chick could actually say she's a dry cleaner, she has to invest 5 years of her life into a concept that she doesn't know if it's going to work or not. In the United States, it's kind of like, I think I can open a dry cleaner. You get a couple of friends around you and go, you can do it, right? And if you got the money and the wherewithal, you can open up a dry cleaner. You don't have to go to dry cleaning school. This is what this country is all about, Christian. It's equal opportunity. It's equal opportunity. That's what this nation is all about. Equal opportunity. If you think you can do it, you can do it. What we have to do, and here's my last slide. This is for all of us. What we have to do is we have to work together. I'm trying to point you a picture of a nation that was founded in the gospel. That's the first thing that needs to be understood. Christianity was central to this nation. Central. Was not a byproduct, was not an afterthought, it was central. The second thing is I'm trying to paint you a picture of a diversity of ethnicities that work together. We don't have any American Indians, but there were American Indians that were fighting with the colonialists. So here you got Spaniards driving down to Cuba. Cuba's like, yo! So if you think Cuba's all about the cause of freedom, they were. What happened, I don't know, but it's all good. Havana was involved in this country. They were involved. Stop dividing. Refuse this stupid ethnic nonsense. Refuse to participate in it. Refuse. But there's injustice. I know there's injustices. There's systematic injustices. Systematic. There are systems within this country that doesn't just destroy ethnicities, they destroy entire economic classes. Be poor and get arrested and see what happens to you. They will destroy you. Destroy you. Systematic injustice. Be rich and get arrested. Off you go, right? That has nothing to do with ethnicity. That has to do with economic status. That is a systemic problem. We have a court system that's unjust, that's corrupt on a lot of levels, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, come on, I got a witness on that one, right? It's true. It's true. Some of you need to get involved in those causes. Some of you need to fight for that level of justice. Some of you need to rise to that challenge. It's systemic injustice. It just is. It's wrong. Holistically wrong. There's oppressions, but we are the voice, right? Why don't you say this? Be bold. Be fearless. Speak the truth, Christian. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. All right? That's what happens. They want silence. Silence. Quiet. Quiet. We'll take away your Facebook. We'll take away your Instagram. We'll censor you on Twitter. You know, I mean, this is the level of control they try to do you, or we'll shout you down. Try to be a black person and speak for the injustices being done within the community by certain organizations and watch what happens. Watch what happens. Watch what happens. They'll destroy you. They'll destroy you. I told my wife, I said, you want to become, I said, the world is waiting for a black conservative to step up and start talking. You'll make $1 million. You make $1 million. You will. You will. You have to let freedom ring, Christian. We have to stand with one another. Say it with me. Stand with one another. Right? We're one. Especially in Christ, we're one. Red, yellow, black, or white, all are precious in His sight. We're one. We're one. All are equal. Jesus is the great equalizer. I don't care what you come from. You come to Christ and you've been given value and worth. You're now a son and a daughter and an heir. All right? You're royalty. Welcome to the family. Speak the truth from God's perspective. Say this. Speak the truth from God's perspective and not yours. Our opinions don't matter. We have something in America, even among Christians, is the sovereignty of opinion. We think our opinion really matters. At the end of the day, my opinion is irrelevant. What is relevant is what the Lord says. in my opinion, subordinates, submits, and willfully bows to the voice of the one who is greater than me. It doesn't matter what I think. And we've got to come to that conclusion, right? Freedom for all people. It doesn't matter what you think. That's what the revolutionists would say. It doesn't matter. When they fought this war, it's like all men are created equal. It's in our Constitution. Why are we oppressing people? Why are we withholding from people, right? Again, there's broken systems. I'm not naive. I'm not an idealist, right? I get it. It's like, well, there's all this brokenness. I know that. I know that. The call is to the higher level, right? The call is to the higher place. We have to not get involved in the stupidity, and we have to rise to a higher level and pull towards that higher level. Speak the truth from God's perspective and not your own. I'll give you another one. Any of you millennials out there, I got something for you too. Start a talk show related to modern issues from God's perspective and speak directly to your generation. Get yourself a YouTube channel, whatever your preferred thing. I've said this to several people. I was just looking at a girl the other day. You know how many followers? She's got 40,000. And there are people in this room that are her age that are smarter than she is. 40,000. And she speaks truth into a generation. Speak a different narrative. Step up. Get yourself a little microphone. I don't know. Start a podcast. Speak issues. Just take the issues of the day. You want to get followers? I can't always do that because my call is the kingdom. So I try to avoid these types of subjects only when necessary. But I'm like, it's 4th of July. I can do it. Pistols in the pulpit, baby. Let's go. Start that. Begin to speak truth. Speak truth in love, Christian. And here's the last one, and then I'll give you a little statement. Support and stand with what is right. You don't have to agree with all of the voices out there, but you should individually, but you should support the voices of what is right. They want to separate voices. Our strength is together. It was the unity of the colonies that brought freedom. John Adams said it was like getting 13 clocks to chime all at the same time. There were massive differences of opinion, but they unified because they said, if we don't unite, we will be destroyed. Our strength is in our numbers. Our strength is in our unity. We don't have to agree with everybody. We don't have to agree, but we have to support things that are right. Stop killing your prophets. Good God, this generation kills the prophets. Someone speaks prophetically into a culture or calls something out, and it's the church itself that turns against them. And Jesus said, you kill your prophets. Prophets are cut from a rough cloth, in case you don't know. They're not always easy to digest. They don't always have, you're not always going to agree with them. There are secular people that God is using that are cultural prophets. Well, I don't agree with him on this one, so I don't listen to him at all. Well, do you agree with him on that one? Can we support that? You understand that the idea here is to stand with what is right. And everybody say with me, let freedom ring. Woo, I'm ready for some hot dogs, man. Let's go. Get the fireworks. In the words of Lincoln, we cannot allow a government of the people, for the people, and by the people to perish from the earth. Amen? All right. Let's say it with me, let freedom ring. Let me bless you. We'll have a prayer team available if you need it. School of Prophetics this afternoon, and I'm going to bless you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine down upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you in every way. And may he give you peace. May you forever live within his favor. In Jesus' name, amen. God loves you. We love you. Have a wonderful week and a happy holiday.